Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 291, featuring Jose Gomez, who is the Executive Creative Director of ATK PLN, which is a really cool company and sort of a shoot off of the Real Effects company, which is another great company. And it was really cool talking to Jose. One thing that was very interesting is that ATK PLN is actually came out of his other company called Shilo. And at Shilo, I actually worked with him 15 years ago. Not 15 years ago. I've worked with him, I want to say it was probably about like 10 years ago or so. And I didn't remember until we all started adding the dots together. I was like, wait a minute, we both worked on that Scion commercial together. So it was really funny. We got this idea to do this podcast because they came up to us and suggested Jose be on the podcast, and I thought it was a really great idea. But it was really funny that we had this connection that was happening. What was some of the things you liked about the podcast, Kristen?
Well, he started like at 14 years old, his like career path just from, skateboarding around, hanging out with people, and he kind of met the right people. And he's all self-taught, like just his whole career is like awesome. And I was saying he just like retains information. He's smart. So that was really interesting. The companies he's worked for, and even the shoe company, he's like, oh yeah, we just did that. But he's like, it made like 120 million sales one year. So he's like, it's not little. And he just does it. I was like, cool.
Yeah, I know. I mean, going from like a skateboarder to a graphic designer to a shoe company to, all these things. So he's really definitely an entrepreneur and a creative person. And he doesn't seem to leave one thing good enough. It seems like he's always needs to tackle the next thing. He was a really cool guy. Definitely very inspirational to hear his drive and all the things that he's done. So it was really great to do that. So it was really cool to talk to Jose there. He's based out in Dallas, which is where Real Effects is as well. And we talk all about how he got there and how ATK PLN got made and all of those different things. So really great talking to him. And I think you guys are going to enjoy listening to the podcast. So let's talk about some events, upcoming events. Kristen, what's going on?
All right, so these are all online events we have coming up, and you can find these out at chaosgroup.com/events. The first one is September 9th through 10th. It's going to be the Power of V-Ray 5 series. So they're going to talk about that, and you'll learn more from that, and you just sign up online. September 10th is the ProCAD Expo, and it's the 2020 digital edition. And last is September 10th through 11th is Catch Up with SketchUp 2020. And you can learn how to make the most of V-Ray for SketchUp. So it'll be fun.
Awesome. Again, all of these events are listed on our events page, which is chaosgroup.com/events. We have a little bit of news when catch up. First of all, Chris and I just literally, as we're recording this intro, we record them usually a few days before the podcast comes out because we got to do all the editing and stuff. But we just came off of 24 hours of chaos, and it was quite the event. Yes, literally started around the world. It started in London. That was zone 1, and then we were zone 5. And we started, and then it went all the way to New Zealand, around to Bali and back to Bulgaria. So over 24 hours, we basically went around the world, had over 60 speakers. It was a blast. It was really fun. I did not know if we could pull it off, but we came off. It was almost flawless. It was just couple of things where like my mic went out for about 10 seconds. Yeah. I mean, but if that's the worst of it, and if you're, went
really well. I was like watching, I was like, oh my gosh, they're doing great.
Really well. And I think everyone really loved it. And I think we're going to, we're incentivized to do it again. I think for sure it's going to be really cool. The logistics of it is a little bit hard, and staying up for 24 hours is
hard, but doable.
Hard, but doable. Yeah. So I did sleep. I'm going to admit during a part of it, so I'm sorry about that. But a really great event, awesome guests, and can't wait to hear your feedback. I know everyone's going to say, was it recorded? Was it recorded? Yes, the whole thing was recorded. I think obviously we're not going to put it out as another big giant 24-hour video to watch. We're going to split it up into segments, so I think we're still figuring that out, but definitely going to have everything online at some point. Another cool thing that I came out of it is that this was sort of one of our big things where we were really kind of putting the tests on Twitch. And I think we're going to start doing more Twitch shows as well. So something I'm really looking forward to, because I think Twitch is just a great opportunity for us and a great channel for us to do that stuff. I mean, it's really good at streaming stuff. So
Yeah,
I was very
amazing.
excited. I was really excited about that. So that's enough about that. We have a couple. What other news do we have, Kristen?
Just not much, but just V-Ray 5 for C4D is coming soon. So can't say much more about that. But.
Yeah, a lot of people are asking about that. That's obviously big news. That was actually even covered during 24 Hours of Chaos. Vlado mentioned the amount of work that went into it. It was literally 2 years of works of rewriting V-Ray from scratch for Cinema 4D. So that's coming out. But the good news for you guys is that it'll be V-Ray 5 for Cinema 4D. So you'll be all current on that. So very exciting. Very soon coming out. So check it out. Make sure you go to chaosgroup.com to check out any news, especially find out when the beta of C4D is coming out. Beta of V-Ray for C4D is coming out. Okay. All right. Is that it? I think that's it, right? That's all we have? Yep. Okay. If people want to find out more about the podcast, where can they go, Kristen?
You can go to facebook.com/CGGaragePodcast or chaosgroup.com/CGGarage.
Great. And if you guys have any ideas or suggestions for our podcast, we are looking forward to hearing from you. We will be we can email us at labs@chaosgroup.com, and that's where you can give us all your ideas. And of course, if you'd like to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, please do. That would be great. Ratings, reviews, and shares are always welcome. All right. That being said, please enjoy this amazing podcast with Mr. Jose Gomez of Attack Plan.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passe. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has Fresnel.
So thanks so much for doing this. This is great. I'm really glad you guys made the suggestion to do it and to be on and have that. And I really think it's cool. So let me get your company is part of Real Effects. How does that work? Because I know a couple people at Real Effects and stuff. How does all work?
Yeah. So let me raise the volume a little bit. So the way it basically works is Real Effects is like the mothership, if you will. And
okay.
Early on, Real Effects started out in commercial filmmaking, right? In commercial animation.
Yeah.
But as time progressed, Real Effects got more and more into making movies, animated features, and whatnot, and that kind of. It not diluted. I think a lot of people felt like, Real Effects, they don't do commercial, production anymore. They're in the movies.
Okay.
So, my background is I had my own commercial production studio for, better part of 20 years. And we kind of joined forces to create Attack Plan.
Okay.
Under Real Effects, right? So Attack Plan is the Real Effects commercial division. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Are you based in Dallas as well?
I am based in Dallas now, yeah. And I'm originally from California, and, I kind of split my time from California and New York.
Okay. All right. Well, how long has Attack Plan been part of Real Effects?
Going on about 2 years now.
2 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 years.
All right. And so that's when you started. You sort of like your companies kind of merged and you became that.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Okay. Now I understand. Because I've known a few people from Real Effects over the years, way back when. So back when they were, like you said, they were, mostly known for their animation work and things of that nature. So I knew that Real Effects is a pretty big company, actually. How big would you say they are now?
Yeah. So, I mean,
like all together with Attack Plan.
Yeah. I mean, maybe something like, there's probably 200 in Dallas,
right?
Maybe 300 in Montreal, and then maybe another 50 in LA,
right?
Because LA is more of the kind of management of
Right.
the relationships with the studios.
Yeah.
But most of the production for movies either happens in Montreal or Dallas. So yeah, I'd say about 500-ish.
That's a big company.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a big company. And and how big is Attack Plan as part of that company? How approximately?
We're small. We're about 25, 30 people.
Got it.
And I think when we ramp up and for projects and whatnot, there'll be freelancers and stuff come in just like any other production. But yeah, we're, from a commercial standpoint, that's about a medium size, studio.
Right. Yeah. Well, that sounds really cool. I'm really, it was really cool to see that and to look into the kind of things you do. But what'd be really cool to figure out how you end up doing what you're doing. So let's start a little bit of an origin story. And from what I understand there's some interesting things that got you into graphics and into all this stuff, right?
Right. So, I mean, yeah, I think I'm unique in the fact that I'm pretty much completely self-taught,
Sure.
This is going way back. So like around 1991.
Okay.
I was probably 14, 15 years old.
Okay.
And a guy by the name of Andy Howe, he was a professional skateboarder, and I was a skateboarder at the time.
Yeah.
And also a graffiti artist and an artist and just drawing and skating and being a kid,
Uh-huh.
So, anyways, he saw my art and he's like, "Hey, you really should come work for." Oh, did I lose you? Oh.
No, you're good.
Okay. You really should come work for our company drawing skateboard graphics and whatnot. So I started.
But this was a skateboard company.
Yeah, it was a skateboard company,
Okay.
a pretty big skateboard company.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I was in. He started me out doing that, and then eventually I became, art director and then creative director, and I moved to California, and I did that for a really long time, and then I went off and started my own skateboard company with this guy Chris Miller.
Okay.
And did that for a number of years, and then this company called K2, they make skis and things like this. They bought my company at that time, and they kind of gave us the task of starting a skateboard footwear brand.
Okay.
So I did that for a number of years, and the way this all kind of got, commercial production and directing and doing animation, all that other stuff happened because, I mean, similar to guys like, Spike and, we were all shooting these skateboard films, right?
Right.
And then what I started to do like in the early 2000s was like, hey, because all the skateboard films, they were all produced the same way. And I was like, hey, can we introduce animation into this? Like, can we do really cool main titles for the film? And I started to learn, this was like After Effects freaking 1.0 or something like that. It was really primitive back then. So anyways, I got to fiddling around with animation and directing and kind of that stuff. And one thing led to another. And I started my own studio in 2001.
Okay.
But
what were you doing for the skateboard companies? I mean, you were doing videos, obviously, but were you designing things? Were you doing product design?
Yeah. Yes. So I was doing product design. I was doing clothing. I was designing shoes. I was designing skateboards. I was designing snowboard outerwear. The gamut.
Well, that's a big skill to pick up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's a different skill, and it's fun, right? Because I think what's interesting is like I've always been a creative person, and I always found joy in designing things.
Okay.
Even doing industrial design and stuff like that, and especially with shoes, it was really cool going on trips and getting inspiration and designing those things and drawing those things out and kind of thinking about those things was really fun.
Well, sneaker design is a big deal.
Yeah. And it's I mean, it's really intense,
Yeah.
Going and it's like designing a car, You know,
Right.
there's so many moving parts and so many things that you have to account for. But you know, on the skateboard side, we were, you know, I was designing all those things, and you know, with the films that we were making, you know, they were getting, you know, pretty good coverage, and you know, we were selling a lot of units. And I think at the height of, you know, when I left the company that we had started with K2, I think we were doing like 120 million in shoe sales.
Okay.
And so it was not a little company. I think we probably had like 100,000 square foot warehouse, and it was just like really complicated. And I just thought, I just found so much joy in the animation and motion side that I was like, I'm going to start my own studio. And I kind of was like, I told the powers that be at that time, I was like, I want to Seinfeld out of here. Like, I want to leave on a high, right? Like, I want to, when the company's doing great and everything's awesome, I've kind of set up the creative department in a way where it was like really self-sufficient, and I left it in good hands. And I was like, but I want to go do motion. I want to go do animation. So,
and what year was this approximately?
2001.
2001. Okay.
Yeah, 2001. And then when I left, you know, they still did great for a lot of years, but I was solely focused on my studio. And gosh, I did a lot of work straight off the bat for like MTV, a lot of MTV work, you know, and VH1, that kind of stuff. But, you know, one thing led to another, and then, you know, directing, you know, television and directing commercials, and yeah, just kind of took off from there.
And so when you started your company, what was your company called in 2001?
It was called Shilo.
Shilo, okay. And you had, in Shilo, you had, right, that's right, you mentioned. And then Shilo became part of Attack Plan in 2018, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yep, in 2018.
Okay.
And, you know, that was kind of like really serendipitous, right? Because it was, I think at the time, we were trying to, you know, being your own self-funded studio, it can get complicated at times, and you're always looking, you know, for a little bit more of a wherewithal, you know, like a infrastructure. And I think that's what, you know, Real Effects provided. They just kind of were like, you know, take a look at this, and we have this, and I was like, sounds great to me. So yeah, so it was a meeting of the minds that was really, you know, I think, you know, at the time they didn't have a commercial department that had like a name, right? You know, It was just Real Effects, and, you know, there was a little bit of identity crisis. So what I did was, you know, with, essentially he's like my partner, David Bates, he's the managing director. We kind of sat down for like 6 months, and we were like, how are we going to rebrand this company? You know, and what is our vision going to be for the company moving forward, so that it has a clear kind of brand presence, right? So people understand like, hey, this is what we do in commercial production. You know, the movie guys do the movie stuff, but we focus, you know, on design and animation for commercials.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, I get it. It's just interesting to think about, like, you know, what allowed you to do that, and coming up with a rebrand is kind of a tough thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think we probably haggled over the name for a better part of 4 or 5 months, probably meeting like 3 times a week. And, you know, at the end I was just like, I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And, you know, the funny thing is I made for our CEO, our CEO goes by the name of Steve O'Brien, and he's the CEO of Real Effects. And I would go in and we would present to him, like, here's our, you know, 10 names that I have.
Right.
And I had like a strategy, like, this is, you know, and I labeled our presentation to Steve, and it said, this is our attack plan. and we went through all the names, and Steve's like, I don't like any of the names, but I really like attack plan. And I was like, wait, but that was the name of the, okay. And I was like, you know what? And then after a while, I was like, you know, at first I was like, but I didn't think of it that way. And then I started thinking, and I was like, man, it has a nice ring to it. So
yeah.
And I was like, you know what? That's a really cool name. And I was like, let me try to figure some things out, because what I didn't like was spelling out the whole thing.
It's a lot of spelling.
It's a lot of words. But then I was you know, being from California, and there's a big car culture there.
Right.
And I was, you know, back in California, and I was looking at a license plate and said, you know, one of those silly acronym ones. It's like, you know, born wild or something, you know,
BRNWIL.
BRN. Yeah. So I was like, you know, I was like, this works really good. You know, ATK PLN.
Right.
And put in a little box, and it, you know, and that's how kind of like attack plan name came to be, if you will.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool idea. I think it was a great idea. It was a great idea.
Yeah.
And so, but I mean, Shilo was obviously, you know, you had established yourself in LA, and Shilo had been in LA, I guess, the whole,
And New York.
and New York
And
as well?
San Diego. Yeah, San Diego, because, you know, I had a house kind of down in this neighborhood called Del Mar.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't really want to move to LA. And I would just drive to LA for shoots and things like this.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, you know what? We're going to keep the office in La Jolla, which is kind of a nice beach town down there. And then our office in New York was in Tribeca.
Okay.
And, you know, that was convenient.
Wow. And so did all of that sort of become part of Real Effects?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's pretty great.
Yeah. And but yeah. So now we're, you know, in Dallas and kind of in a high rise in downtown. So it kind of makes me feel like I'm in a little mini New York. I like it better there. Then we were in like the hipster neighborhood before, like big old building that Yahoo used to own. Mark Cuban
Okay.
had down there, and then we moved to like this high rise in downtown. So I'm like,
Oh, you're talking about in Dallas, right?
in Dallas, yeah. So I was like happy about that because it just felt more like the city,
Right.
You know, and I mean now for the last few months, obviously with COVID,
Right.
you know, we're working from home and stuff, but it, you know.
Yeah. I haven't really left the house that much since
I don't mean either.
since March.
I'm like been a hermit in here.
Yeah. I
Doing a lot of podcasts.
Yeah. Podcasts are good. I've been recording podcasts from home, so that's been good. Yeah. But yeah, I'm actually based in LA, so.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's cool. But I used to live in Texas. I used to live in Houston, so a long time ago. So I'm familiar with both of those worlds for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, it's hot. It's hot in Texas.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
The first summer here, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
This is really hot.
Mm-hmm.
But you get used to
Get
it.
used to it. Yeah, and there's a lot of miles in Texas.
Yes, a lot of miles.
A lot of miles in Texas. But yeah, it's an interesting. I like Texas. Actually, it's a pretty interesting state, and there's a lot of great creative stuff going on there. In all areas, including Dallas and Austin and San Antonio and Houston. So
yeah. My kids love it here.
Yeah.
I mean, I was surprised how metropolitan Dallas is.
Oh, it's very much
great.
It's a big city. It's a huge city.
It's a huge city. You know, it's not as big as New York, but it has such a great. I mean, I don't want to divert from whatever, but there's so much great culinary stuff here.
Yeah, Houston
you
too.
know?
Yeah.
So, you know, so that was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. Absolutely. But okay, so I wanted to talk. I mean, so you're talking about your design and you know obviously the stuff you were doing when you're doing product design for skateboards, etc. And you like doing motion things. So did you gravitate more towards motion graphics or just generally commercial directing of all kinds?
No, it definitely started out very motion graphics.
Okay.
You know, and it really got the inspiration early on because I was looking for reference, you know, to do titles and stuff. And I stumbled across this company called MK12 and they did a I don't know if you're familiar. They did some experimental piece called Sweater Porn, and it had nothing to do with porn,
right?
But it had to do everything with like it was kind of this weird 50s kind of thing. And at that time, they did it as like a 2.5D execution, and I think before that was like very new at the time, the whole 2.5D thing and After Effects, and I was just like blown away, and I was like, I want to be doing stuff like that,
right?
So I got really heavy into motion graphics, and then as you know, the years went on, I started thinking, you know, we started to kind of up our game a little bit, and we started to dabble in 3D, and then I was like, you know, I taught myself Maya, and we were like doing all sorts of stuff in Maya early on. And I mean, early on, Maya was I mean, to put it bluntly, really unstable. So it would, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no comment. But it was at the time it was really unstable. So
Right.
it was a little bit of like beating your head against the wall. But
Right.
we learned it, and we did some things, and then as you get bigger and bigger as a studio, you kind of have to then start juggling a bunch of different things. And, I started hiring in specialists and
Right.
particle people. And, obviously you get to a point where either you're going to creative direct and direct or specialize in, one of the
Yes.
elements that you need to get
Yes.
into. Right.
Yeah.
So I couldn't be like, oh, I'm going to be on the box and creative direct, 20 people, at the same time. So
that is a hard thing, right? That's a hard thing to do because sometimes when you know too much and you're asked to direct and you just get frustrating when you do it yourself. And
that was my major problem.
Yeah,
Yes.
a lot. You're not. It's very common, and so having to give it up a little bit, and you just have to do it long enough that you're not as good as the people you hire.
Yes. Well, and I always say too that like if I know, like if I hire someone and I know more about what they're doing than they do, it gets me like super annoyed.
Yeah.
I'm like I'm having to teach them. Like I should never be teaching people how to do things. But luckily, most of the people that we have brought in, I love it when we bring someone in and I'm like, hot damn.
Right.
You know what you're doing and you just blew my mind. And it would have taken me like 50 steps to do what you did with your script,
Right.
So that to me is very exciting, is when you hire someone who's like light years ahead of you.
Right.
Yeah.
I absolutely. I know what you mean. I mean, it's really kind of cool. I think especially when you're starting a company and you're starting to hire people and trying to figure out like how to get the right talent in there and how to grow your company, right? Because with especially in the new companies, every person you bring in is a major impact on where you go from there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, even in commercial production, it's a lot of it is freelancers, right? So,
right.
Like once a week, I'll go with the production staff, and we'll go over like 20 different reels and then we'll put people into categories. So we have a really big matrix of freelancers that we use, but we're always trying to find new ones. So we're always actively searching for those people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're doing that still today. I mean, how is it today now? Obviously, with COVID, everyone working from home and stuff. Is the freelance market like still work from home? Is this still a challenge, or does it work?
Yeah. No. I mean, it works. I mean, a lot of the people being in Dallas, especially, a lot of the people that we hire, they work from home.
Right.
So like we'll hire people that are in Barcelona.
Right.
And they'll we'll give them tasks and things to do, and they execute from their home. I mean, that's the good thing. Even before COVID, we were really good at working from home.
Okay.
And remote,
Yep.
But there's some certain things that you can't do remotely. It's hard to do, like, flame work, for instance. It's hard to do that from home.
I have a flame in my bedroom right now because of that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Or when it's like if we're ever doing work for Marvel or something, it's like tier 0 stuff, and you can't, it's security things. And
well, I think it's interesting is that those things have actually relaxed quite a bit since COVID, because otherwise it just wasn't ever going to get done. And I think people have discovered workflows that are actually pretty interesting to do work from home. And I think it's interesting. You guys have been working with freelancers from home for a while, so that's a good practice to have. I mean, do you think that's not a bad thing? I mean, to have that?
No. I think working with freelancers from home is I would rather get the best people and let them work from home than settle for someone that is maybe not as good in coming into the office, right?
Right.
And I think in our new world, you have to get good at like letting people work from home.
Sure.
And we use a lot of things like I know we've been really big on Teradici, using
that seems to be the thing that everyone's using.
Yeah. And those tools really kind of help the whole remote workflow and infrastructure. And even if you can call that infrastructure, it's more like a outfrastructure. But
sure.
It's nice to have, like, if this was like 10 or 15 years ago, we probably couldn't do it, because the internet you didn't have broadband like you do now. Yep. And, things weren't as like buttoned up, it would have been really tough.
Sure.
But I think with today's technology, you're pretty good. So.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. And I think what's interesting about it is that, it's sort of, allowed everyone to rethink, needing to come into work.
Or how productive they
can be, yeah, et cetera.
Outside of the office.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So that I think that's really a cool thing to do that. I do want to ask a little bit about since you said you started in 2001 and then you're now in terms of starting your company. So there's a lot of time that has passed and during that during then and now. Obviously, you start to hint a little bit about technology changing as you go. What have you noticed during at the sort of really, there was a new beginning of motion graphics that was happening, with companies like MK12, like you said, back in the early 2000s, and that evolved a whole bunch of both in terms of the way things looked and the aesthetic that people use. What do you see the evolution of motion graphics over the last 20 years and how that's evolved?
Well, I mean, over the last 20 years, it's definitely evolved to the point where it's way more sophisticated now, and it's become more sophisticated and kind of this. It's hard to explain, but it's almost like these stylistic avenues have formed.
Okay,
you have like, I'd say like a studio. And this is kind of like an abstract concept, and I think like you can't really pinpoint.
Okay.
Motion graphics has done this over the last 20 years and whatever. But I think to me, when I see things, it's kind of like our studio. Our avenue is. I think our sweet spot is where live action, animation, and design kind of intersect, right?
Okay.
So like. That's kind of like our sweet spot. So we'll direct live action, we'll have animation and graphics, integrated into that, or we'll do another sweet spot for us is character animation, right?
Okay.
Like, cinema quality character animation.
Okay.
And those types of things. But then you have studios like, Oddfellows or Buck, and they have a very kind of, you could see it like, when they have a very distinctive style, right? It's very 2D, It's very minimalist.
Yeah.
Very thin lines. It's, they do a lot of work for like Facebook or, things like this. And it's all very like big, bold colors. So, like kind of like that's their calling card, right?
Sure.
So I'd say like there's, each studio has, and then you have the studios that are very like, everything they do is like Houdini particles and like, exploding 3D abstract objects with, Nikes and stuff,
right.
So there's definitely kind of, I would say this materialization, it's materialized where like there's like these different avenues of stylistic, execution have kind of, gone on. But I mean, the thing is I think in general over the last 20 years, motion graphics is kind of matured, it's grown up, right? But at the same time, it's become more accessible. And there's like, studios like us that are say 30 people, and we're doing say the mid to the high level productions of commercials, right? I'd say budgets are somewhere between like 100 and 500 or something,
Okay.
you know? And then you have two guys in a room and they're doing commercials for $45,000
Right.
or something, you know? And like, they can do everything soup to nuts
Right.
with like Nuke and Houdini and, you know,
Right.
Maya or something. So, yeah, it's, look, when I started in 2000, there wasn't a lot of studios either. You know, there was a handful of studios. So that's another thing. Now there's, you know, you could throw a quarter out the window and hit a studio on the head. Right. It's like there's so many.
And the tool sets have changed so much to the point where now it's, you know, it used to be like, you know, it was After Effects. It was After Effects and whatever After Effects could do. And now all of a sudden it's like more 3D. And it's not just Cinema 4D. Now it's Houdini. Now it's Maya. Now it's like
Yeah.
you know, and
no, it's almost like After Effects used to be like the go-to tool for us. Like everything was After Effects.
Right.
You know, and then now if we use After Effects, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, we're using After Effects. Yeah, like let's go. But you know, it's usually like, you know, and sometimes like I kind of chuckle to myself, and because I'm thinking, you know, I'll tell the guys, I'm like, we could just do that in After Effects, and they're like, yeah, we'll do it in Nuke, and I'm like, okay, all right. You know, but at the same time, you know, you're right. It's the tool. There's so many incredible tools now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that it just blows my mind. And you know, quite frankly, I'm not like I was saying before, like I'm not on the boxes as much as I was before, but I love dabbling and, you know, getting in there and just kind of filling with stuff. But I'm like, you know, it's in a weird way, it's become so powerful and simpler at the same time. It's not as a heavy lift as it was before, where like now, like when in the early 2000s, I'd be like, how are we going to do that?
Yeah.
You know, I'd be like, how are we going to, and we'd hack something together to get the look.
Yeah.
But now, you know, if I'm in a meeting, I'm like, we need to have this and we need to do this. And people are like, yep, I'll just do it with this and I'll put it here and we'll do it with this tool and we'll buy this extension or whatever. And everything is just really doable.
Okay.
Right. And it's, you know, it's not as hard as it once was.
Well, let me ask you this, because, you know, motion graphics is obviously, a lot of it is design or abstract, right? It's not as like, you know, I need a robot killing a thing. It can be a lot of abstractions in there. Yeah. And so, which is what makes it so beautiful as a design idea, right?
Right.
But I used to come from architecture, so I was an architect back in the day, and you know, we were joking when my coworker, who was also an architect, and we said, you know, Boulder, Colorado is like the city that was built by SketchUp, right? Because like all the buildings, right? It's like, you know, and you can tell. And the thing that, you know, that statement means is like,
it's so true.
it's the tool, and by using the tool, it ends up sort of helping make a design choice for you, because that's the thing that the tool does. Like, oh, I can do this in After Effects, and then so that's what it is, right? And so, do you think that the tools,
it's a danger to that?
There's a danger to it, or is it also a sign of the times? Like, you know, oh, that's really cool.
It's a little bit of a sign of times, but I see what you're saying. It's kind of like some of the trends are kind of dictated by what the tools push out, right? And provide, right?
Well,
especially
when everyone's starting to decide, like, oh, we're going to start using Houdini for motion graphics. Then everyone started learning Houdini, and then there's a ton of Houdini out there, right?
I know, and then you look at every, you know, and it kind of, you know, I can't watch TV without being like, oh gosh, okay, another Houdini particle emission, or, you know, something that looks exactly the same, right? And there are things where if you're in the industry, you're kind of like, you know, there's a guy, the CG supervisor who works at our office named Patton. He's always like, I can do that in 5 minutes. They did it with this tool. And,
Right.
and I'm kind of like, it's taken away some of the mystery, right? Like I used to love watching something on television,
I mean, I
and
could
being
tell
like,
trap code plugins every time I saw one.
yes. That's it. That's exactly it. Like trap code shine.
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh, why did they have to use trap code shine?
Yeah.
And I've been guilty of using it too. When it first came
Sure.
out, I was like, shine, trap code shine. But those types of tools sometimes lead to not as unique outcomes, right? Or
Right.
unique
because
outputs, right? Because like
you just turn it on and it looks great. And then
and it looks like A+, and you're like, holy crap, this looks amazing. But like, I used to like it when, early on, you'd see things where you're like, how in the world did they do that?
Yeah.
Like, how did they pull that off? And that doesn't happen as much anymore.
Yeah.
And I feel like because, like I was saying before, the tools have become so good that the output is such such high quality, but it's a little bit homogenized in a way, And like that's the thing that I'm always trying to, for us, like as a studio, being like, how can we get away from that?
Right.
How can we make things that are unique and are pushing the limits? Because it's so hard to like. Sometimes when those tools are so good, it's hard to identify where the limits are, and then like how to put, where to push them, or like, do you make new limits up, or you go in different directions that are more abstract and less in your face because you have an easy tool to solve the problem.
Sure.
So, if that makes sense, I
Absolutely.
think it's just always for, at least for me as a creative director, I'm always kind of like, when you've been doing it as long as I have, you've seen so many things, and when something isn't being done to the pushing the boundaries of what's possible, right? So then you kind of like, like we could do something, that looks great, but what where else can we take this? How
Yeah.
can we twist this? How can we squeeze more uniqueness out of it?
But that's
right?
got to be a challenge now, because obviously there's such a demand for motion graphics, right? There's such a demand for design, etc. So coming up with something that hasn't been done is going to be really hard.
No, it's really hard. I mean, like I was saying before, it's like that piece that MK12 did. That was the first time I'd ever seen 2.5D animation.
Right.
And now it's just like, I was like, back then I was like, how did they do that?
Right.
Now, it's been a really long time since I've seen something that I'm like, how did they do that?
Right.
So,
do you think that's
Do
because you
I-
have more experience now, or it's just because?
well, I think because the tools have come so far that it's almost like when everything's possible, it takes a little bit of the mystery away from the output,
Yep.
So it's like, where can we, and a lot of people are like, oh, AR and VR, and we have a division, Flight School, and they focus on AR and VR and stuff, and I think that's great, in those, VR, and I really like AR execution, but right now I'm trying to figure out how can we make things for cinema and the small screen that are unique, and it's super difficult. I think about it all the time. I'm like, I don't have that answer, and then it becomes to me it becomes less an exercise of trying to make something that no one's seen before, and trying to make something that has an artistry to it, right? That, like, in art, you always find
Inspiration.
uniqueness. Uniqueness and a voice and a style, and it becomes less. To me, I think I try to rely on that because it becomes less of a gimmick and more of like a stylistic choice,
Okay.
right? And like something that's more artful and less, just a new, fad.
Sure.
In motion graphics or whatever.
But do you think there's obviously fads in motion graphics?
Oh yeah.
right. I mean, and
Yeah,
that's a
absolutely.
thing. It's like once
Yeah.
once something cool happens, then it's
Yeah.
and that's actually not unique to
No.
motion graphics and architecture. Is the same
Yeah.
thing. There was a guy named Alex Roman, and he did a piece called Third and Seventh, and when that
That
came
everybody
out,
wants it.
everyone was doing like that was the ArcViz brand for everything ever since then.
Yeah. And then from a company standpoint, you're always looking at those when you don't have those fads on your reel.
Right.
You're like, uh-oh, how can we do something? Because everyone's calling, can you guys do the squiggly line over the, you know,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. You know, when you don't have it, you're kind of like, you know, you get caught out. But
Wow. It's weird.
You know, it's,
Did you have to do it even though you're reluctant to do it, right? Sometimes.
well, it's just kind of, yeah, it's kind of like you have to react, but at the same time, you have to know, sometimes you have to know when to pass on things because you're like, we're not the right studio for this,
Okay.
you know, no matter, and you know, I've even noticed like as the years roll on, the requests, especially from agency people, has gotten even more specific.
Really?
You know, like and I always use this like metaphor, but you know, they will be like, I need you know, do you have a pink elephant on your reel driving a boat in Lake Arrowhead? And I'm like, we have a pink elephant on a reel. We have him driving a boat, but he's not in Lake Arrowhead. And they're like, oh, you know, and then it's like game over.
But that's ridiculous.
Really,
It was like, we can
Yeah.
make a pink elephant on a boat for you in Lake Arrowhead for your commercial.
yes, exactly. But you know, but they've gotten so specific. It's like, you know, I had a thing where, you know, they wanted to be. It was a live action shoot,
Yeah.
and it was a request, and it said, oh, the director had to have directed dogs, and I was like, well, I haven't directed dogs. You have animal handlers for that, but I have, you know, on the reel we have horses and giraffes and monkeys
Right.
and all sorts of other animals, but there's no dog, and it was like disqualified, you know. So
Really?
yeah, it's just become so so like specific like that you know, it's a little disheartening sometimes, but you keep going on and trying to hit all those marks. But you know, we do what we can do, and you know, especially from a studio perspective, it's like sometimes if they want a certain style and we don't have it on our reel, we try our best to kind of convince them of like, hey, look, we do A+ level work. This is kind of like what you're asking for. It might not be exact, but we're confident we can achieve that. And sometimes it works, and sometimes
Yeah.
they're like, no, we want someone who's done exactly, you know, this.
Do you think they're asking for that because they just want that moment? It's like, yes, that's exactly what we want. Do that again. Or is it because
Yes.
because
Yes, the first
the
one.
first one? It's not that they're risk averse. They just they can't see
Both.
Both. Okay.
Both. Yes. Yes. Like, you know, they want to know that they want to find the one studio that's already done their project so that they know
I
that
mean,
they're.
to me, I would feel like,
yeah.
well, someone's already done that, so we're not going to be unique, right? It just seems a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they are that is a prevailing thing. Like they want someone, and you know, a lot of them, it's the way agencies have been since the beginning of time.
I guess
you know,
so.
they're very risk adverse, I think is the best
Yeah.
way of saying it.
Yeah. I used to work in commercials. I used to, it was at a company called Sway for a while. I was their head of
yeah.
3D. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we did a project with Sway. Didn't they focus on cars?
Yeah, it was a car place. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did. Yeah, we did. We actually worked with Sway on a Scion campaign.
No, at Method.
Yeah. Yes, and Method
Wait,
did a
I
lot
did
of the
work with
yes.
you.
Yes.
Yes, I was
yeah.
the head of the 3D at Method when we did the
Yeah.
thing, and it was the
Yeah, and it was like the type breaking apart.
Yes.
And like the cars would come.
and yes, and the cars were breaking
yeah.
apart and coming back together again. Now
Yeah.
I remember. I
Yeah.
said, you look
Yeah.
familiar, and I remember
Yeah.
seeing you. Yes, I was
Yeah.
the head of I was the VFX supervisor on that whole
No
thing.
way. Yeah. And I would come in
Yeah.
and I would look at all.
And what was the
stuff,
name
yeah.
of the guy of the director?
Simon Needham?
Simon. Yeah.
Yeah. Simon Needham. Yeah. It was really, really like, you know, he was I had a conversation with Christo. We were talking because he has a studio with Blind, but
It's so funny. I was like, wait a minute, I know this.
Simon,
guy.
he was.
I was looking at you the whole time. I was like, I know Shilo.
Yeah.
We've worked with Shilo
Yeah.
before. I was trying to remember.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep.
Yeah, and I remember like because there was a lot of companies working on that campaign. It was Shilo.
Yes.
It was Stardust. And Blind. And
Yep.
then
Yep,
and
exactly.
Method did some of the cars for us, and I don't know if they did it for
Well,
other,
what we did is
other-
we did all the cars and the driving and the CG. You guys did the graphics and the
everything,
design.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
So
yeah.
so because we could do I mean I specialize in cars.
The photorealistic cars, and also that's like something that at the time
It was very hard.
was super hard and not in our capability set. So we would find places like Method and be like, just render the cars for us, you know. But yeah, I mean that's crazy. It's that and I remember, you know, Method's still around, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was a great studio. You know, there was a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of good work coming out of it.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. I remember that whole campaign. It was a big deal.
Yeah, it was, and you know, it's
You had to
kinda
do
like,
40 different versions of the car.
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, those types of campaigns, they're few and far between at that level these days, you know, because everything's more bite size and a little more disposable, you know, like I think back around that time, it was like 2000, what?
This was
9,
2000,
10?
2008 is when it was.
Yeah. So like around that time, like I think commercial campaigns were more precious or like bigger.
Definitely bigger.
And I think bigger.
Definitely bigger.
You know, and
People
I
were
think,
spending millions of dollars on a car, on a commercial.
Yeah, and I used to, you know, if we probably get, I don't know, maybe $3 or $4 million campaigns in a year,
Right.
And now we'd be lucky if we saw one.
Yeah.
You know, but now it's more of like these. Everything's kind of like. It's the way I kind of see it is like there's still the same amount of output, but it's like had fallen through a grater, right? Like it's just like a big, like it got like chopped up into like little chunks.
Right. But you're not I mean, like commercials are not just for TV anymore. It's mostly for web and Instagram and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, no, it's all like Instagram, YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, like
and 15-second, 10-second commercials and stuff like that.
No, 5
seconds.
5 seconds, 10 seconds. You know, like but so like instead of like say a commercial campaign, let's say it was like. I'm just using some weird analogy, right? Like say it was a gigantic block of tofu. Like that was like, you know, that was the commercial campaign. Now it's like, imagine taking that tofu and running it through a grater that has like 50 different little cubes. And you're making a 5-second one and a 15-second one and a 10 one and a 6.
Right.
And then
different aspect ratio on the side banner. Square
exactly.
Instagram.
And it's so that one big block of tofu now is a mondrian
Right.
of different size cubes and
The
executions.
deliverables must be amazing.
Yeah. So it's more deliverables. Like before, it used to be like, oh, here's $500,000 and we need a 30-second spot. Done, right. And now it's like here's $300,000 and we need 30 spots cut down from the spot that you're making, but we need it at a cajillion different aspect ratios.
Right.
So that, you know, but that's just the sign of the times. You know, it's like the delivery methods have changed so much. It's like it's still the same amount of content. It's just divvied up and diluted into these million different avenues.
It's got to be really hard to deliver all of that, though. It's got to be a real.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we have like a thing where we even make it into a sales point, right? When we're pitching work, we're like, hey, we know that we kind of have our own little methodology on how to deliver work that is like that, right?
Yep.
So we have like this, you know, I mean, proprietary, if you can call it that, but this like system that we have where we built, where it was like the way we shoot, where accounting for all these different aspect ratios, and the way we animate, we're accounting for all these different aspect ratios, and the output. So we're kind of, instead of backing into that problem, we're kind of hugging that problem and being proactive with it, right? And coming up with a methodology and a pipeline that is like, can be easily malleable, I guess. Delivery methods. But
yeah, well, that's got to be a challenge. Actually, that's an interesting challenge, right? You can't just have a campaign that has a bunch of movement only going horizontally in case you have a banner ad that's vertical, right? And that's okay. Let me ask you about this, because I always used to joke about, like, whenever someone would send a video and they would send me a video of something and it was shot vertically, and I would like slap their hands. It's like, no vertical video, but now vertical video has become a thing, right? And so there's way.
Oh yeah, it would make me cringe every time. I just feel like,
right, but now you have. I'm sure you have to make commercials that are vertical videos, right?
Oh yeah, for like Snapchat.
Yeah,
it's like I'm sitting there going, well, how am I going to do this?
Right?
And it's weird because I remember back in the day when 4:3 was the standard. It was like the square. And when that kind of went away and every commercial was starting to be HD or 16:9, I was like, thank God, like I don't ever want to see 4:3 again.
Right.
Let it be dead. Mm-hmm. Good riddance. And then now I'm like, here we go with the square.
Right.
And here we go with the vertical thing again. And I'm like, I can't escape this, but yeah, like, things, even when I'm on set, shooting live action, I'm always thinking about framing. How can I maximize my, my footage so that I can use it in an execution for Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram. And, part of even animation and filmmaking, you kind of want to see everything in all its glory, right?
Sure.
And but nowadays, people's eyeballs, you have to either adapt or die, right? Like you have to adapt to where the eyeballs are. Nobody's, like, sure, people are still watching television, but if you are not on the cusp of rising to that creative challenge, then you're kind of failing, right? But I actually, even though I cringe at some of the aspect ratios, I derive joy from those challenges, right?
Sure.
Like when I'm put in a sandbox, or I'm put in in some way to get, like a little jail, and I'm like, oh, how do I get out of here? Those are the types of things that excite me, like creatively. It's like when you get put, when you have no limits, creativity kind of meanders, right? When you have like really strict limits or challenges, then that's when your creativity gets really, flexed.
Sure,
I guess you could say. So, it's the good and the bad of the current, state of the world we live in. I think it's social media and the way we deliver work now. Yeah. It's just so vast.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm just, thinking about like back in 2007 or 8 or whenever, or 9, whenever we were doing that, it was like, that was, people still just 16:9 was it,
Oh yeah.
HD 16:9, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you're thinking like, oh, great. And then everything's going to be 4K. And then I remember everybody was on the like 8K and like, everybody, wanted every spot delivered in 8K or something,
right?
Or 4K. And now people, how many times do you hear people say, oh, I want the spot delivered in 4K? That sometimes, but a lot of times, it's on a computer, it's on a phone.
Right. Yeah,
it's not like it's not as that kind of like settled down a little bit. Like people going nuts with the resolution, right? Like I think like at least on the delivery side, like I remember a couple times where it was like, oh, 8K. I mean, when we do work for, say, like we just did the new Paramount animation logo.
Okay.
And we worked on that for like 6 months, and it's like big deal or whatever. And of course, we have to deliver that at like the largest resolution ever because it's going to be, in movie theaters.
Mm-hmm.
But most times, when you have commercials and they're talking about socials and delivering to YouTube, they just, mostly it's 4K is probably the max.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, I just got to think of like, how that works. But yeah, man, that's pretty cool. I mean, I'm thinking okay, so now that we, that and we like where we've come from here, where do you think it's going to go in the future? What do you think are the trends that are going to be interesting to look at? It's hard to tell now post 2020.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think, like the way I look at it is for so long, especially advertising was a curated experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's like 30-second chunks,
Yep.
15-second chunks. And in large part, it's still like that today, right? It's just, I just think that to me in the future, and I could be completely wrong about this, but I feel like we're gonna be creating more things that are live tool sets, right? That are like animated experiences that either will react to a live stream or a live event, or because everything to me, I feel like it's becoming even more instantaneous and integrated rather than, even with like the advent of streaming, right? Like people just streaming constantly. And I feel like advertisers and companies are going to try to figure out a way to get their experiences out in a kind of reaction, like that it reacts to what's happening live, if that makes sense. I don't know if that'll be the whole chunk of it, but that and
So real time is you're thinking it's real.
Yeah. Real time creative that, is somehow, and maybe that will be like a passing fad, like say VR. VR, I think, isn't a passing fad in the actual technology, but I remember, I felt like for a while advertisers just were like everything onto VR.
Oh yeah, totally.
And they were, and then they kind of like after a while that kind of died down, and people are like, not many people are wearing these glasses, and but they're always going to be trying to figure out, new ways of getting their message across. And I think like real time creative somehow figuring out a way to make that work. I think it might be one of the things that will happen.
Okay. Do you think there's going to be some real time tools they're going to start developing, and that's going to?
Yeah, maybe, or being able to do, say, getting your message across with like predetermined animation and predetermined creative, but live triggers, right?
Yes. Okay.
So like say because there's no way to do amazing creative with like a script or something. You need to be able to like pre-bake the creative, think about the creative, still curate the experience, but have it, maybe it, something triggers a certain aspect of it to execute.
So, and
right?
especially if people are doing it on their phone, right? If they have their phone, then it becomes an interactive commercial experience, right?
Right. Yeah. It's, or like say, during a live stream of something, there might be a guy, he takes a sip of Coke, and when he takes the sip of Coke, some animation you've created beforehand, or some creative somehow interacts with either the stream or the audience, or, displays in a way where it's less obtrusive, I guess, than just cutting away to a 30.
Right.
So I mean, I'm just speaking out loud, and who knows what'll happen.
I think it's a brilliant idea. I mean, I think obviously the real-time stuff is happening across the board on a lot of different things in terms of how things are. And I think you're right. I think especially if you go with mobiles, it's just, as you're saying, is the natural thing of mobile is for it to become an experience that you interact with,
Yeah, and I mean, you have platforms that, like Twitch and
Yep.
YouTube and all those channels that are basically, you know, they have a lot of eyeballs on them, and everything is trending. You know, you have the curated content on YouTube, and then you have live streaming content, and it seems like a lot of the live streaming thing is getting even more and more traction, right?
Right.
So how we take creative forward and how we react to live content, I think is going to be key.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I think that's going to be very interesting. It's very cool.
Yeah.
But, listen, we're just about an hour, which is the perfect podcast.
Okay.
So I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
It's so funny. It's like, I know this guy. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's it. There was a Scion commercial.
Yeah.
That was a really fun
Yeah.
campaign. That was my last
It,
That was my last foray into commercials, and I loved it.
oh yeah, man. That campaign, you know, even, you know, Simon was a hard ass.
Yeah.
And he was,
Yeah, and I like
you
that
know,
about him.
But you know, and I was saying this before, he was like probably one of the hardest clients to work for.
Yeah.
But man, I will say that campaign turned out really good.
Yes.
And it was like I was saying, you rise to the challenge,
Yep.
right? And that was like one of those times where I was just like, oh, we
Totally.
this is great. I'll remember this.
Well, that
one.
was the time obviously the Sign commercials, which was through Attic and through Simon, they were, he had a passion for motion graphics, right? And so he
Yeah.
created this brand of sound commercials that were very inspired by motion
Distinctive.
graphic, right?
Yeah.
And so he wanted to bring up photorealistic cars, and he didn't know if he was going to be able to pull it off. And we did a small local campaign with him as a test to see if we could do it, and we did it, and that's what allowed us to get to the bigger one that we did together.
Yeah.
But we did this
awesome.
thing, and I was like, I had to convince him that we could do photoreal cars, and it was a big ask.
It's still,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard to do photoreal cars. I mean, you know, people think it's simple because it's hard surfaces, but there's so much nuance to
Yes.
the way they move.
Yes.
Especially getting the movement is the hardest part.
The movement and I've actually thought about this quite a bit. There's actually a lot of similarities between cars and humans because you're so familiar about how a car looks and feels
Moves.
and moves that if it looks slightly wrong, it's like the uncanny valley of cars.
Oh, 100%. And you know, and just talking, and I won't take up.
No,
too much
go
of
ahead.
time, but I remember I went to Sway.
Yeah.
Because we were subcontracting Sway to do some car work for us at Shilo.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was you or somebody else, but they demoed the
Drivatron, yeah.
the Drivatron thing, and I was like,
Yeah.
you know, I was like, this is awesome, you know, and it was kind of like the thing that the mill did with that, you know, the car and all that other stuff. But yeah, cars is like one of those things where, you know, you really need to have all the little intangibles, right?
It's a
perfected.
good driving physics is number one, and then really good car paint and with correct reflections, not too shiny, because the first thing you know is if it looks like a Christmas ornament,
Video game.
then it's not good. And then the headlights are like the eyes of the
Key.
car. So if you don't get the headlights right,
And then doing the interior is even
oh
harder.
gosh, the interiors are very hard.
Yeah.
Stitching
Maybe
every
we'll-
stitch.
Yeah. God, I still wake up in cold sweats over car interior.
Yep, indeed.
So, anyways,
Thanks so much, Jose. I really appreciate
you
you
so
coming
much.
on, and good luck with everything in Dallas and your company. And Attack Plan is an awesome name, and I like the way you guys spell it.
Thank you.
And that's
Yes.
great. It's great. I'm glad
Thank
to see
you.
everything's
Thank
going
you.
well. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks for having me.